Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me and ÄPEX Contemporary Performance on our 5th anniversary week. I am Garrett Schumann. I'm the president and executive director of ÄPEX Contemporary Performance. And joining me today is Leah Claiborne, who is an assistant professor of music at the University of the District of Columbia. Leah is a pianist and was recipient of the 2020 Father Eugene Merlet Community Service Award at the Pro Musicis International Music Competition in 2019. And this is given to the competitor who demonstrates both an exceptional level of musicianship as well as an outstanding commitment to social outreach. And Leah was supposed to be a guest with ÄPEX Contemporary Performance as a speaker and soloist in April of last year, or of 2020. And of course, that wasn't able to happen, but we're so glad, Leah, that you were able to join us today. Thank you for sharing that amazing performance. And I wanted to ask with my first question, if you can tell us a little bit about the photographs that were with you on stage. How did you select them, and what was the meaning that you wanted them to bring to that concert?
Yes, so those photographs are very personal to me. Those are my great-great-grandparents. And they were actually sharecroppers in Georgia, in this town called Soperton, Georgia. We do know, tracing history back, that my mom's side of the family were owned by the bankers of the town. So just going through family photos and learning about my own history, it's been very meaningful for me. So when I was doing this recording, uh, learning these Negro spirituals, I definitely wanted to incorporate my own family into it, because these are songs that I definitely grew up listening to. They're songs that have been passed down from generation to generation. So it was just a really great moment for me to take my stance playing these melodies, but then also just this feeling that, we're all connected, that those who really were breathing that music and singing that, singing their sorrows, that's still, like, even within my blood as well. So I wanted to have those images, kind of like a comfort for me in a way, as I was doing that particular piece.
That's an amazing element to that performance. I did not know that those were your family members. What you said about the melodies being passed down connects to one of the questions I had, because the piece you played is Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's setting of that melody, and there are other settings of that melody. The one I know that I mentioned to you is by Clarence Cameron White, who was a contemporary of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's. And I'm curious, you already talked a little bit personally what that melody means to you in terms of your connection to your family history, but as a pianist and approaching this setting and knowing that there's intertextuality there, what does that mean to you when you sit down at the piano to play it, and as you are learning these pieces and teaching them potentially to your students?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I'm a pianist, so I think this is the best instrument, right? that ever exists. I have to approach it in that way. But there's something with the spiritual, right? With any music that has words attached to it. The words often just give it away. It gives the feeling, the moods, everything is kind of in your face right away. So when it's just solo piano, I feel like pianists just have this really wonderful ability to be able to portray and capture the mood and the spirit without the words. So the words to this particular melody, I'm troubled, I'm troubled, I'm troubled in mind, like 3 times, 3 reiterations of that. If Jesus don't help me, Lord, I'll surely die. Right. So, I mean, every single word, the way that's in this particular arrangement, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, it's so powerful. It's in F minor. I mean, it's a dark key, right? And then when he does rise up, if Jesus don't help me, I surely will die, coming back to the tonic. And then Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, the way he handles this particular movement, the textures that he uses that keep changing. Um, there's this one moment in this particular arrangement, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's arrangement, where it just seems so personal. It's like a personal prayer. Um, and as the performer, I imagine Samuel Coleridge-Taylor writes in the bottom of this piece that there's a particular slave from Nashville, Tennessee, that sits on a log and with tears flowing down his cheeks, he sings this melody with so much pathos that few can listen without mourning, or few can listen without weeping. So I think about that when I'm performing this as well. So it's not just, yes, it's the words, but it's all the history and the context that comes behind it, because we have so much documentation of this history, American history, and it's the piano's chance to sing these songs.
I think your performance is spectacular, and especially when you
Thank you.
talked about the different textures on the piece, it's a distinctive compared to other instrumental settings of this melody that I'm familiar with. It's a distinctive feature of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's take, where there are these very thick chords and then very very spare, relatively speaking, spare moments, and you navigate those so well. And thinking about the challenge of conveying the meaning of these words that are absent, I
Mhm.
think also you do beautifully, and I can also see the pictures adding that meaning too as a really wonderful element in a performance context. I'm so in the I My next question is about how you combine scholarship and performance, and I feel like you've already been talking about that, about how you um, what you bring to the piano is steeped in history, lived history from your family, but also research that you've done. I'm curious something like with the ＡPEX Anthology, something that ＡPEX has been trying to do over the last couple of years is bring more of that into our practice. And so I'm
Mhm.
curious what you think the value or the significance of trying to not just be a performer, but somebody who's conveying more knowledge when you play. As what do you think? What motivates that? What would you want to pass on to our audience or other musicians watching about that kind of practice? Because you're a fabulous example of it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Garrett. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel with any performer or student, I tell my students, like, I can't teach you how to love a piece, right? So there has to be some type of like initial attraction for wanting to study the piece and wanting to perform it. For me, with Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, excuse me, the 24 Negro Melodies, like I said, I grew up listening to these melodies. They were shared in my family. So of course I wanted to dive into just the history of where they came from. With this work, the 24 Negro Melodies, there are several of the melodies that are coming from West Africa. And then there are others that what he calls the American Negro melodies. So even just looking at the similarities between these West African melodies and then what they have turned into essentially to the spiritual, what we call the spiritual now. All of these things, they're deep within me, right? They're things that I would have loved had I not even, done music, because it's just part of in me, it's part of my family. So I always tell my students that as well. Don't just pick a piece, off of the shelf and say, okay, let's program this. You have to be able to willing to dig deep into the culture, into the composer, into the meaning behind all of it, and be able to examine it in so many different ways. And then in the end, what do you have to say about it, right? That's the key.
Mhm.
And I think that's the beautiful thing with music. You do all this studying, but at the end of the day, it's your take, it's your story, it's your moment to tell your own testimony about the piece. So yeah, that's I try to remember that for myself, and then also try to tell my students that as well.
I think I think we're so lucky that you are doing what you're doing as a performer and a teacher and a scholar. And as you were talking about this, the approach that you have, I was thinking this piece is from 1905,
Mhm.
and the late 19th century and early 20th century is one of the first periods where composers of African descent had the agency socially, politically to explore these themes.
Right.
And so you see in, um, not just this specific melody, but pieces that there's such a rich, interconnected cultural just web of cultural production from this time period. I hope that there's it's so great to return to it and bring that it's so great that you're bringing that to your practice now, about 100 years later. And it's a time period of music that I think mainstream classical organizations have so much more to uncover from. And
Absolutely.
so, and of course you're helping set an example to do that.
Thank
Uh,
you. Yeah, it's, when you're saying that, I remember, I'm paraphrasing because I'm not great at quoting people
mhm.
exactly. But Nathaniel said, I mean, he talks about this. He writes, we, meaning, Blacks, African Americans, we too have feelings, we have emotions, and they need to be programmed in these platforms. For him, he meant in the opera, string quartet, sonata, chamber works. So that America can see we Black people also have a voice, and we are the voice of America as well and need to be recognized. And I think you're absolutely right. This is a time where there is more agency for Black people. Um, in the forward of that piece, 24 Negro Melodies, Frederick Douglass, he says, again paraphrasing, if Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, he represents everything. If a Negro was given opportunity, you would have Samuel Coleridge-Taylor.
Mhm.
I just think that's amazing. It's absolutely amazing if there was more opportunity given, and even today, honestly, right?
Oh,
If there was
absolutely.
more opportunity given, more platforms created, like ＡPEX is doing, um, it's better for American history and American scholarship and performance.
Well, and I think something that having the chance to collaborate with you and Anthony R. Green, who's also being featured this week, and the other people who help with the ＡPEX Anthology has really taught me the necessity of bringing in all the history too.
Mhm.
And you see, like Harry Lawrence Freeman is one of my favorite early 20th century African American composers, and just like um, Maud Cooney Hare or James Monroe Trotter, he wrote a history of African American classical musicians because for him it was inseparable, the artistic practice and then telling the history. And of course there are reasons why telling the history was so important, because so many institutions wanted that history not to be recognized and shared, institutions led by people who look like me. But we have the opportunity to make a difference now, and I do think, I hope that with amazing artists like you, doing such wonderful work and making fabulous careers, that uh, cultural institutions in the United States that want to feature this music will understand that you can't just take the music and put it out there. There's history that goes with it. Going back to my first question, that's why it's so great that and incredible that you had those pictures on stage with you, because you're not just performing, you're telling this much larger story when you do that. Um, I have one more question, and it seems kind of trivial after this conversation, but um, 2020 is almost over,
Yes.
and hopefully things will be different. As I mentioned before, you were supposed to come to Michigan in April and give a talk at the Ann Arbor District Library and also do a performance. So what is one thing you're looking forward to artistically in the next year?
Yeah, that was the toughest question you gave me. You gave it to me ahead of time, and I'm still like, oh.
Yeah.
But yes, believing we come out of it here. initially I thought live performance. I mean, that would be my go-to. Um, but I feel like the music community has done such a great job with continuing their output of music, of artistry. Yes, having live music will be wonderful whenever it's safe to do that again. But I think, like with many of us, it's been a fantastic opportunity just to dive back into scholarship, which is something, goodness, we met at Michigan, right? You have all the opportunity in the world just to be a student and to dive into materials. And, for about 2 years, I've really missed that with this new position in DC, because we're teaching so much. And then when you're not teaching, you're trying to get ready for a performance. So the scholarship has definitely taken a back seat a little bit, at least to the amount that we have all this time in the world now with
Mhm.
2020. So it's been really fantastic, to really put that in the forefront the past several months. And for me personally, that's something I'm wanting to continue to dive more into, or I should say, make it more of a priority. Um, because we know there's just so much music out there that's just
Mhm.
not being performed. There's music that's in the public domain that's even published, but it's just still not being performed to the degree that it should, right?
Mhm.
And you were alluding to this earlier. We as performers and scholars, yes, we need to be performing it, but personally, I don't feel anyone owns this music. If you're willing to
Mhm.
do the research, if you're willing to put the time in the way you would, look into a Beethoven sonata and do all of your work, you should do that with the Negro spirituals or any other piece by a Black composer.
Mhm.
So it takes all of us to be able to put this music out there on programs.
I hope that what I would love to see is for performance practice to be redefined in that way,
Mm.
where there's so much specialization that you learn at a place like Michigan, where composers are supposed to write pieces. They're not supposed to re-engrave manuscripts, by Harry Lawrence Freeman, which is something I've been doing this year, or pianists aren't supposed to go to I don't know, the Library of Congress and find a piece to play or something like
Right.
that. And that's part of the reason these pieces don't get played. And so again, you're such a fabulous example of how you really can have it all as long as you can find the time. So
If you find the time, sure.
yeah, yeah. But I totally relate to almost there almost being a silver lining in the disruption on the work that we do as musicians this year, to be able to kind of reconnect with priorities in our practice. And I totally love what you had to say about, understanding that scholarship needs to, hopefully that you'll be able to find the time that you want to for the doing scholarship in the future. And we hope that too. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm so honored to be able to share your performance and your amazing ideas and perspective with our audience. And we will, if those of you watching, if you're interested in learning more about Leah, there's a link to her website with the video, so you can keep up with all the great stuff she's doing. And I hope you have a great evening, and thanks so much for joining me.
So good to see you, Garrett. Thank you so much.